Hello, everyone. Welcome to Community CPA's 3 p.m. webinar. Thursdays is our special day. We have our guest speaker here with us. So today's topic is a very important one for businesses, which is about sexual harassment, its impact on the workplace, and how you as a business owner or manager can address these issues correctly. So today we have our friend and guest, Ted Williams. He is an HR consultant, has had many years in consulting about the workforce in a range of different corporate settings, so from small to large corporations. So we will get on that shortly. But before we dive in, Ted, is it okay if I go over some basic information about Community CPA?
Please do.
All right. So, hold on one second. So, as many of you know, Community CPA is a full service accounting firm. You can find us on communitycpa.com. We are also on YouTube, Facebook, and other social media platforms. And we are a regional firm, so we have 3 branches, one based in Des Moines, the other in Iowa City, and then one up in the Twin Cities. And we provide accounting, advisory, legal, audit, payroll, and tax services. So we are a very diverse team. We collectively speak 9 different languages to help share our knowledge. That is an important part of our firm culture and values. So we know if you do well, we will as well. About Ying Sa, many of you already know her. She is our CEO and managing partner, and she serves on the National Taxpayer Advocacy Panel, which is an advisory committee to the IRS. She loves to advocate on behalf of taxpayers, so if there's ever issues that you think the IRS can improve on, please do let her know. She's very open to that conversation. Ying at communitycpa.com is how you can reach her. And she also has her first book out, Appointment with Ying at 8 a.m., and that is on starting the business. And she's currently working on her second book, her 10 a.m. book, which will be on developing the business. So I think she's about halfway through it. She's still working on it, and you'll find out more information as the book progresses. So no responsibility disclaimer, of course. The information we are sharing here is generic, and the situation of these things are fluid. So please speak to your advisors on things pertaining directly to your business. And so now we will kick it over to Ted. Ted, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I have about 30 minutes, and what I'm going to do is share with you what I think are some critical components to address how you would deal with sexual harassment. As you can see, the Williams Group has been around since 1987. We started originally in Berkeley, California. Then we moved to the East Coast in the New York area. And then finally, we moved to the Midwest in Des Moines. Through all of this, we have kept our customers in all 3 areas. We have clients on the East Coast, we have clients on the West Coast, we have clients in the Midwest as well as the South, and we have 3 clients in Europe. We have clients with as few as 5 employees and as many as 15,000. We are workforce experts. It just so happens that I also have a very heavy legal background, which allows me to marry the HR component with legal realities. And my focus is helping you help yourself as you run your businesses. Catherine, could you move to my next slide, please?
Yes, sorry, hold on. Oh, yep.
Okay. Here's some realities. Things have changed in the workplace, and people have different attitudes about what is acceptable behavior in the workplace. And as you know, as owners, as managers, that it is your responsibility to make sure and ensure that you have a harassment-free workplace. That is one that is devoid of harassment, whether it's sexual, whether it's racial, whether it's gender, age, or disability. And so that responsibility lies with you. You cannot expect people to know what it is you expect from them, but you can articulate what is acceptable in your workplace. So when it comes to harassment, you absolutely cannot ignore complaints or allegations. To do so is not only illegal, it could lead to liability. So regardless to how harebrained you may think a complaint or an allegation is, you must investigate. Now, for many of you, you say, well, I'm not equipped to investigate. I don't know how to do it. This is why you rely on folk like myself, HR consultants, or employment and labor law attorneys. Trust me, if you don't know how to do it, it is cheaper in the long run to engage the services of a seasoned HR consultant or an attorney. They can save you a lot of time, a lot of energy, and oftentimes quite a bit of money. I am suggesting that you as employers, as managers, take steps to develop an appropriate crisis management plan in the event of complaints or allegations. With social media out today, things can get out of hand and out of control before you can blink an eye. We know this. So if we know this, we need to plan for it. So if it occurs, we already have a plan. Could I have that next slide, Catherine? So here's a checklist that I put together on how to recognize, prevent, and address sexual harassment in the workplace. Although my topic today is sexual harassment, this could be a checklist for any type of harassment in the workplace. First, it starts at the top. The board, if the organization has a board, the CEO and owner must be on board as it relates to managing harassment in the workplace. It cannot and will not be tolerated, and that needs to be articulated from CEO down to custodian. No matter what the size of the organization, I don't care if you have 2 or 2,000, you need to have a written harassment policies and procedures, even if you don't have an employee handbook. You still need the policies and procedures. I would strongly caution you not to go to Google and take one off the web and make it your own. If you do, I strongly encourage you to have it reviewed by an attorney or by an HR consultant to make sure that it has the elements and components necessary to be a viable policy and procedure. Next, and you say, we're really busy, we don't have time to do it. Matter of fact, I even have a mobile workforce or I have a remote workforce, so how am I going to do it? Well, Zoom has become the currency of the workplace recently. You should and you must provide an all-employee harassment training and development. I would think at least once every couple of years, you could put together a 1-hour training and development workshop or seminar or webinar, if you will, on your organization's position regarding no harassment in your workplace. I am strongly suggesting, and this is why I said all employees. I've had situations where employees went through the training and managers and owners did not. Very bad idea. I don't care who it is. All employees, again, from CEO to custodian, must attend. It is mandatory. It is not voluntary. Again, I would suggest a person like myself or an attorney would be best suited to provide you with that training and development workshop, webinar, or seminar. And most of us are pretty reasonable in the context of how much it would cost when you look at the cost-benefit analysis of providing that training so that you can show as an owner, as a manager, as an employer, you have made it clear that you have trained and developed your workforce regarding no harassment in the workplace. This can oftentimes save you a lot of money if, in fact, you get sued. Oftentimes, when you show that you had provided that training, an employee knew or should have known what to do, and they did something anyway, you, the employer, are off the hook. You need to review every alleged case of harassment and look at allegations and outcomes, because what you're looking for is a pattern. How often do we have this? Why are we having this? What do we need to do to make sure that this is either discontinued or minimized? So this is why you need to keep a look-see. Now, many people have said, well, wait a minute. I might be doing a record against myself that can be used against me. I think when you weigh how important it is that you consciously and intentionally observe what's going on so that you can make necessary changes is a lot more important than whether or not you have records that could be used against you. Matter of fact, I would submit to you that they would put you in good stead because it shows you are earnest and you are really attempting to address this in good faith. I'm strongly suggesting, and this may sound a little odd to you, what I'm suggesting, but it's very inexpensive and pretty easy to administer. Put in a harassment hotline that bypasses HR and is reported by an outside provider directly to the board. If you don't have a board, it would be directly to the owner. And if you have a manager, it would be directly to that senior manager. Now, why am I suggesting that you bypass HR when almost every place you go, the first thing they say is go to HR or go to the person responsible for the HR component? The reason why is, in many organizations, sadly, HR is not trusted. HR is not respected. And employees feel that if I share information with HR, the only thing HR is going to do is use that against me. Whereas if you go the route I'm suggesting, you don't have that issue. Most HR departments are competent. They are there to assist the employer and the employee, but unfortunately, we have that perception, and what I'm suggesting by taking this route, that allays that concern. When you have an allegation of harassment, oftentimes you need to remove the complainant from the respondent. And remember, we don't have guilt at this point. We're investigating. We're trying to find out what went on. So that means you need to interview the complainant. You need to interview the respondent. You may need to interview other employees or witnesses. And because this could be a problem whether it's a big or a small organization, I oftentimes recommend put the respondent on paid leave of absence until you have fully completed the investigation. So what happens if you find out that the allegation was meritless? Well, you paid the respondent even when the respondent was not at the workplace working. So there's been no loss of income. Well, what happens if you have the respondent away from the workplace and you paid them pending investigation results, and you find out, in fact, the respondent is guilty of the allegations? You have two ways to approach it. Some clients say, I want my money back. And they get their money back because oftentimes they have a waiver that says, sign this. If guilt is determined, you must return monies. Many other employers say, tell you what, keep the money. Because of the nature of this, you are either going to be suspended or terminated, depending on the severity of what was an allegation that is now a fact. Please take each and every allegation seriously. Do not deny, dismiss, or defend. Investigate. Find out your facts. Research any data you may have on it. Ignoring it will not work to your benefit, and it can and will be used against you. Another thing I'm suggesting, consider women in leadership roles. Now, let's be clear. I've been at this over 30 years, and I have seen all forms of harassment, sexual harassment. I have seen situations in which the moving party was a male versus a female. I've seen it where it was a manager harassing an employee. I've also seen it where it is a female harassing a male and an employee harassing a manager. I have seen it where the harasser was a man and the harassee was another man. I have seen it in which the harasser was a female and the harassee was a female. So there are all types of combinations that can occur in this situation. So I don't want you to make the assumption that all harassment is male boss versus female employee. That does not discount the fact that more and more organizations are realizing that when you have women in leadership roles, it reduces your harassment numbers. I think it's pretty obvious why that's so. Ensure and insist that due process is utilized. When I say due process, what I mean is you do not go blatantly off and say, you're guilty, I'm not going to do an investigation, you're fired. You have to go through a process to find out what happened and determine the severity of the offense. Let it be known throughout the workplace that harassment, bullying, and retaliation will not and cannot be tolerated. Investigate the allegations because it may prevent litigation. Provide incentive and rewards for bystander intervention and participation. What I'm saying is that oftentimes other employees observe what's going on. Now, in many places, the approach is you managers get the big bucks, so you take care of it, not me. But we have found that when other employees know that their peers will step in, but I advise you, you cannot encourage bystander participation unless you have properly developed and trained these bystanders on what they should and cannot do if they step in. Because if you don't provide that training, you might put that employee or those employees at severe risk and be liable. Be sure that the HR component knows who it's working for. I mentioned earlier that most HR departments have staff who take into account management rights as well as employee needs. If HR is only interested in management rights and not employee needs, that's going to cause distrust and lack of credibility in the HR for the HR department. So that's why I wanted to make sure we mention that we make sure HR knows who it's working for. And in fact, HR is working for the employee, but also working to the benefit of the employer, or vice versa. Let me put it that way. Quell complicity, it does not pay. What I'm saying is when folks join together to hide, to obfuscate, to ignore an action or an incident, it will not pay. It ultimately will be uncovered, and it will cost you in profits. It will cost you in terms of publicity, and it will cost you in terms of recruiting and retention. So you do not want to be known as that employer who does not address issues at hand that need to be resolved. Don't let backlash deny your efforts. If you have a situation where employees, particularly those who are used to doing things a certain way, don't like this, quote, crackdown on harassment, you don't have the option of that. You have to observe and comply with the law. And the law says there is no harassment in the workplace. So you cannot accommodate folk who do not want to follow the law. Make sure all new employees are provided harassment training and development. It doesn't make sense to have your veteran employees trained and development regarding harassment. You also need to make sure that all new employees receive harassment training. Given the technology these days, it can be done by computer, it can be done by streaming, it can be done any number of ways. So my point is, you must ensure that all of your workforce at all time have been trained and developed regarding sexual harassment in your workplace. So I only had 30 minutes, but I thought I would give you this checklist to help you understand how to recognize, prevent, and address sexual harassment in the workplace. I hope it helps you as you go forth in your workplace. If there are any questions, please feel free to, I'm available for any questions you may have.
All right. Thank you so much, Ted, for that presentation. If you have any other questions or comments for Ted, please feel free to pop it in the chat or the Q&A box. So Ted, I do have a few questions as we conclude. One is that if a company does not currently have policies and procedures regarding it, what are some of the first steps that they should be taking if they're thinking about?
As I mentioned, if you have 4 or 5 employees, I would not be surprised if you do not have an employee policies and procedure handbook. But notwithstanding that, you could still write a policies and procedure on harassment. And as you grow, then, when you maybe get to 15 employees, now maybe you may have the funds to have a full-blown handbook. But there are certain policies that you could write incrementally. And a harassment policy and procedure is one of those that I suggest you consider.
Awesome. Yeah, so another question that I had when you were talking about this is what if it's between like an employee and kind of an external, um, like a vendor or a contractor, that sort of thing?
The same rules that apply to employees also apply to visitors and vendors. Because think about it. No vendor is expecting to be harassed when they visit your organization. And let's flip it. And no employee is expecting to be harassed by a vendor visiting your organizations. So the same rules and regulations apply.
Awesome. Thank you. Those were the primary questions that I had thought of. And then lastly, I think it's always good to think about it in terms of, now that we are a remote workforce, the implications of that regarding harassment. So I know that you talked about like remote training such as Zoom, but I think having a remote workforce also has implications on the enforcement side and possibly ways that people are being harassed in different ways than a traditional.
Well, what's interesting is the same issues that employers have with on-site employment are some of the same issues they're having remotely. So you would say, well, how can I address that? I can tell you, and this is interesting because you would think that most people know when you do Zoom meetings, they're recorded. Yet people are doing things on these recorded Zoom meetings that you cannot believe. So when you do the investigation, pop on the Zoom meeting and you will actually see what occurred.
Right.
And in many cases, it's much more definitive than when it's on site because it's he say, you say, I say. Whereas in Zoom, you can see it and you can hear it.
Awesome. Yep, I think those are great guidelines, Ted. Do you have any other final thoughts before we conclude?
I want to just mention that we have to accept the fact that we have now been a year in operating remote workplaces, and it's wearing on people. I am not suggesting that we ignore the reality of the situation, but people are stressed out. And sometimes it manifests itself in ways that we don't really want. So sometimes we may have, let me give you an example. We may have a disagreement between employees. Let's be clear what's a disagreement and what's harassment. And I'm seeing more and more where it's a disagreement that has been labeled harassment. And so that's why I'm saying it's important for us to do this education so we can be clear with people what is what so that we don't start something. Trust me, harassment is not a molehill. It is a gigantic mountain. But we need to be clear what's a molehill and what's a mountain. So that's a good example of a disagreement does not necessarily mean because one person is a male and one person is a female that harassment occurred. So I just wanted people to be mindful of context. These are trying times for all of us. And all of us, whether we want to acknowledge it or not, we have some form of stress in reaction to our current situation.
Thank you so much, Ted. I really appreciate your thoughts on that. So it is 3:30, so we are going to wrap it up, but I am very grateful for your time here today. And we always love having you on. So thank you.
I love being on. Thank you.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining today. Be sure to tune in on Saturday with Ying at 3 p.m. She's going to do her 1 hour long talk. And clients. We're here every day, 3 p.m. So, well, I'll see you later, Ted. Thank you again.
Take care. Thank you.